Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome on into the Space Cowboys show. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day today because, as we know, this defense for the Cowboys in 2025 has been a pain to watch. We understand that this is a mix of the scheme they're running, but I think a majority of the pain that we have to go through watching this defense is a result of poor personnel decisions that have stacked up over time. So what we're going to do in today's video is look back at the drafts throughout the Mike McCarthy era for the defensive picks that they made, see how these players panned out, and really get to the bottom of why the defense is so bad today. Now, before we get started, there's going to be two things. Number one, as a disclaimer, we're only going over the defensive draft picks the Cowboys have made, none of the free agent acquisitions and things like that. I think it's very important to highlight how draft heavy the Cowboys talk about being and having their homegrown talent and all this other stuff because they treat the draft like their bread and butter and their primary source of team building. Number two, some pleasantries. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. It's free and easy to do. Also, subscribe if you haven't done so already so you get more Dallas Cowboys content coming in your feed from the channel and when I go live. Hit the notification bell as well so you get notified of that. And finally, if you want to support the channel further, you can hit the join button down below so you can help me out with what I'm doing here. And also be sure to go to the home tab on the main page to check out the other shows on the Kretschman Media Network. I should also mention as a side note that as we go through these draft picks, they're of course going to be weighted with how I look at these picks. I'm not going to judge a 6th round pick the same as a 2nd round pick unless they ended up being a star player for you because you're not expecting to get that out of a player from that part of the draft. So just want to make that very clear as well as we go through this. And you guys are more than happy to tag along as we go through these draft picks down in the comments section below. Starting things off with the 2020 NFL draft class, the Dallas Cowboys had 4 defensive players drafted. You had Trevon Diggs, Neville Gallimore, Reggie Robinson, and Bradley Anae. Now, out of all these players, the best player is Trevon Diggs. I understand how he's been a hurt guy of recent, and he hasn't been on that elite level when it comes to generating turnovers like we saw earlier in his career. However, him being a starter and a quality starter for you in your defense has been something that the Dallas Cowboys have been needing to get out of these 2nd and 3rd round picks. And so for Trevon Diggs having a first-team All-Pro to his name, he is a 2-time Pro Bowler, however you may feel about that particular award and things of that nature, he's still a good player for you. He achieved a 2nd contract. He's been hurt. He might not be on the team moving forward, but the fact of the matter is to get a player of his caliber at that particular draft selection is important. Then you go to round 3. You got Neville Gallimore, the defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. I'll know that he started off pretty solid. We thought that maybe you get a guy that could be a solid starter for you or even a rotational piece, but he slowly fell out of grace, especially going into 2021 when he got hurt. And then eventually the following year after that, Jonathan Hankins came in and took a lot of those snaps away from him. And then, of course, the Dallas Cowboys using another draft pick in 2023 for a defensive tackle really pushed him out of the team, and his rookie contract had expired. So you did miss on that for sure. Then you go to Reggie Robinson, the cornerback slash safety out of Tulsa. He was only on the team for 2 seasons. 2021, he was injured, and then he's off the team in 2022, and he's been out of the league since then. Then finally, you have Bradley Anae, the defensive end out of Utah. I remember a lot of people were talking about how he was the steal of the draft and he looks amazing and things like that. Well, guess what? He's out of the league. He's off the team, and he's been off the team since 2022. In 2020, he was mainly inactive, and then in 2021, he was a practice squad player, and he was off the team the following season. Now, when you look at this particular draft class, you only had 1 hit out of the other players that you drafted, and when you get to guys in rounds 4 and 5, you want those guys to be good backups for you, but unfortunately, you didn't. So you only have 1 dude that's still from this draft class on your team on the defensive side of the ball. Now moving over to 2021, the Dallas Cowboys put a lot of players on defense from their draft picks from this particular class. Starting off with Micah Parsons, the linebacker slash defensive end from Penn State. Then you have Kelvin Joseph, the cornerback from Kentucky. Then Osa Odigizua, the defensive tackle from UCLA. Then Chauncey Goldstein, the defensive tackle slash defensive end from Iowa. Then you have Nashawn Wright, the cornerback from Oregon State. Jabril Cox, the linebacker out of LSU. Quinton Bohanna, the defensive tackle out of Kentucky. And then finally, Israel Mukwamu, the cornerback slash safety out of South Carolina. These are a lot of picks the Cowboys made on the defensive side of the ball, and understandably so with what happened in 2020. So going through the list as quickly as we can. Micah Parsons, we already know what he did here in Dallas. A 3-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler. He was a fantastic pass rusher for you. He made the transition from an off-ball linebacker, which is what the Cowboys wanted to do with him initially, to turning him into a fantastic pass rusher by accident due to DeMarcus Lawrence being injured. So they ended up placing him on the defensive line, and the rest is history. We saw him go win a Defensive Rookie of the Year. He had a fantastic start to his career. And now he is no longer with the team, as we know. The Dallas Cowboys traded him for Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks. We'll see how those pan out in the future. But the Dallas Cowboys did hit on Micah Parsons, whether you want to admit it or not, or how things ended. The fact is you hit on a player of that magnitude, and you turn that player into more draft capital, and as well as a defensive player for you in Kenny Clark, who's been very good for you so far. Going over to round 2, Kelvin Joseph, the cornerback out of Kentucky. I'm pretty sure we're well aware of Kelvin Joseph. And Burnt Man Toast is what I like to call him because he went by Boss Man Fat, his rap name. And 2021, he was mainly injured. 2022, he was a core player on the special teams unit, but he wasn't a good cornerback whatsoever. And then in 2023, he was traded to the Dolphins for Noah Igbenogany, another special teams player. The fact is you needed a guy like him to hit so that you could pair him alongside Trevon Diggs and focus on the rest of the secondary, but you didn't. And as a result, this hurt you because then this resulted in you wasting a top draft pick on a guy that was off your team in year 3, and he wasn't good for you whatsoever. It couldn't even be a solid backup for you. That's embarrassing. Going to the 3rd round, and you start off with Osa Odigizua, the defensive tackle out of UCLA. This is definitely a hit for you. Why? Because you ended up being in a situation where you needed a good to great defensive tackle, and you got that. You got a guy that's now on a second contract. He's one of the better pass rushing defensive tackles in the NFL, and he's been like that since he's entered the league. You look at how he started off. He did hit a rookie wall in his rookie season in 2021, but moving forward, he's consistently improved and became a fantastic player for you in that defensive line room. So you did hit on him, especially needing that in that room. With the next 3rd round pick you made was Chauncey Goldstein, the defensive tackle slash defensive end out of Iowa. Now, his rookie contract expired, and the Cowboys played him out of position. I always viewed Chauncey as a defensive end, but the Cowboys kept moving him onto the inside, thinking that that's where he should be playing, and it wasn't until they moved him back to the edge side of things where he finally had a breakout season for the Cowboys in 2024. And with that, he earned a contract from the New York Giants. He hasn't been great over there from what I have seen, but at the end of the day, you got a guy that turned into a solid starter for you and as well as a okay depth piece. But with a 3rd round pick, especially a top 100 pick, I'm going to still say that this was a miss by the Cowboys because at the end of the day, you needed more out of Chauncey Goldstein. Had you had the production that he had in his 2024 campaign consistently throughout his career, especially through the first 3 years and not the last year he was on his rookie scale contract, we're having a different conversation. He's probably still here in Dallas, but unfortunately, he's not. So I'm going to say that that was a miss for you. Then you go to Nashawn Wright, the cornerback out of Oregon State. I remember this pick very vividly. We were very annoyed with the Cowboys drafting Nashawn Wright, a guy that had a 6th or 5th round grade on him, depending on how you looked at him. And the primary reason why he was drafted was due to his measurables. He had fantastic measurables as a cornerback, and understandably that if Dan Quinn could mold him into something, then he could be a fantastic corner for you, but he didn't. In 2021, he was mainly a special teams player. In 2022, he was a backup. And then in 2023, He was mainly a backup and was injured, and then he was traded to the Vikings for Andrew Booth Jr. So you didn't get what you wanted out of him. You wasted another third-round pick, a top 100 pick, might I add you, the 99th overall pick in this draft, and you only hit on 2 players, and so far one of those players are still on your team because you converted the other player into a defensive tackle in Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks in 2026 and 2027. I mean, that's not good. You need to really hit on those picks because that's what I think really set the Cowboys back defensively. If we kind of go back and look at this 2021 draft class, this was a key focal point for where we're at today. And there's others, but trust me, this is, I think, where the biggest part of it stems from is all of these pieces that you missed on. Then you go to the 4th round. You have Jabril Cox, the linebacker out of LSU. I remember everyone was talking about how he was the steal of this draft, and understandably so. He had a lot of good measurables. You liked what he put on tape. The problem, he got injured, and things didn't turn out well for him. In 2021, he was mainly inactive, and then he tore his ACL, which pretty much derailed his entire career. He wasn't good in 2022, and he was waived during the preseason in 2023. So Jabril Cox, you were hoping that at best he would turn into a low-tier starter for you, but instead he ended up being a not good player for you and an injury-prone player, so you had to let him go. And then you also had Quinton Bohanna, the defensive tackle from Kentucky. He was mainly a backup, and he ended up getting overtaken by Jonathan Hankins when you made the trade for him in 2022. You're hoping he could be this big behemoth of a defensive tackle for you, but he just wasn't good. And again, as a 6th-round pick, I'm not going to put so much blame on him for not being good. You kind of hope that these players turn into something, but he didn't, and he was off the team in 2023. Then you go to the final pick in this draft, and that is Israel Mukuamu, the cornerback slash safety out of South Carolina, who was a solid corner for you, backup corner, might I add. You tried to play him at safety primarily. He just didn't fit there, in my opinion. You did bring him back on a 1-year deal for this season. However, you did end up waiving him. So the way that I look at it is you had him write out his rookie contract. He's exactly what you would want in a 6th-round pick, a guy that can give you solid depth, and he was exactly that for you. So that was a good pick for the Cowboys. But when you look at this 2021 draft class, once again, this was a huge miss for the Cowboys primarily. I understand you landed Micah Parsons. I understand you landed Osa Odigizua. And you could even say that you landed a guy in Israel Mukuamu to be a solid backup for you in that cornerback room. However, with how many draft picks you made, especially in the top 100, and for you to fail to hit on a decent amount of them, not even just as starters, but as decent backups, that is sad. The fact that most of these dudes were off the team before their rookie contracts could expire. Now, moving on to the 2022 NFL draft class, the Dallas Cowboys had 5 defensive players that they selected in that particular class. You had Sam Williams, the defensive end out of Ole Miss, Deron Bland, the cornerback out of Fresno State, Damone Clark, the linebacker out of LSU, John Ridgeway, the defensive tackle out of Arkansas, and then Devin Harper, the linebacker out of Oklahoma State. Now, when we look at this particular draft class, we start off with a guy like Sam Williams. He has the talent to be a very productive player in the league. However, he has had off-the-field issues. He's been hurt, especially back in 2024, and he just hasn't been able to string together consistency when it comes to developing as a defensive end in this league. So I think that even with where we're at right now, I would still say that that pick was a miss, even considering the fact that he's still on the team. And he most likely will not be on the team moving forward, depending on what happens, unless you get him on a cheaper contract. But then again, odds are the Dallas Cowboys, with how many guys they have in the defensive end room, they'll just look to move on. Next, you move to Deron Bland, the cornerback out of Fresno State. We all know him. He just got paid this year. He started off with his rookie season having the 5 interceptions and being a solid starter for you at that particular point in time. But then we started to see him really grow into being a damn good corner. In fact, you had him in 2023 have a first-team All-Pro, a Pro Bowl, and have the most pick sixes in a season, and he tied for the most defensive touchdowns in a season by a singular person. And he also led the league in interceptions as well. I wanted to bring that up as well. He's been a very good corner for you, and for him and Diggs to be staples of your secondary is huge. If you had a better safety play, then we're having a different conversation of how this really is looking. But when they were both on the field, they have been very good corners together. And I understand that, people want to talk about how he's come back from the injury and things like that. He's been injury prone as well. But at the end of the day, when you really think about it, he's better than what you have so far, and he's definitely earned a second contract. He would definitely hit on this pick, and he's your best player from this draft class. Then you move to Damone Clark, the linebacker out of LSU. He's still on the team. He hasn't been a good starter. He's been an okay at best backup for you, which when you get into the 5th and the 6th rounds, that's kind of what you want. You want an okay backup, but I'm not really upset that Damone Clark isn't walking through the door like many fans want him to, because at the end of the day, if you're expecting a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th round pick need to become your starters, that means that you have terrible roster construction. You got to luck in on one of these guys. Yeah, you luck in a guy like Deron Bland, but you're not going to hit every single time. So for Damone Clark, I'm going to give that a meh selection. I mean, he's still on the team, but he probably won't be after this year. Now, John Ridgeway, the defensive tackle out of Arkansas, this was a pick that the Cowboys completely ruined. Why? Because they waived him, trying to get him back onto their practice squad. Because of how many guys they had in that defensive tackle room at the time, they didn't have room for him, despite the fact that he could be a very productive player for you at that position. And he ends up going to Washington. He has a solid start to his career. He's been bouncing around. I believe he's with the Saints right now. But he's been a solid backup player. And so the fact that he was off the team his rookie season is embarrassing, especially when you needed a guy like him to be a solid rotational player for you in that defensive tackle room. So complete miss by the Cowboys and how they managed it moving forward. And then finally, Devin Harper. He was off the team in 2023, the linebacker out of Oklahoma State. He was nothing but a camp body. As much as you want some of these dudes to pan out, when you get into those 6th and 7th round picks, you're not going to really hit on anything. So that's your 2022 NFL draft class. Moving on to the following year in 2023, you obviously have the biggest highlight of all, Mazi Smith, defensive tackle out of Michigan, DeMarvion Overshown, the linebacker out of Texas, Villiers Fehoko, the defensive tackle out of San Jose State. You can call him Junior Fehoko. Eric Scott Jr., the cornerback out of Southern Miss. So you had 4 defensive players drafted in this particular class. I don't really need to say much more on Mazi Smith. The dude has been terrible since he's come to the Cowboys. And the problem is the Cowboys keep moving him around for what kind of defensive tackle they want him to be, when in reality they should have just stuck him in as being a one tech and called it a day. But it's because of Mazi Smith not living up to what the Cowboys wanted him to be that you had to make the trade for Kenny Clark with Micah Parsons, because the Cowboys thought the only way they could fix this room is by trading one of their better players for a player of Kenny Clark's caliber to fix the room to pair alongside Osa Odigizua. Well, now your defensive tackle room's fixed, but Mazi Smith wasn't part of the solution on that. So he's still on the team. He'll most likely be waived at some point, but right now he's still there, and he hasn't been good. Not even a solid backup for you. He's just not been good. Then you move to DeMarvion Overshown, the linebacker out of Texas. Now, he has been injury prone, to say the least. I think that that's even a understatement. But when he's been healthy, he's been fantastic. He reminds me a lot of Sean Lee, right? When he's healthy, he's this fantastic linebacker that you have in your secondary. But the problem is he's hurt. And we're not sure when he's going to come back in 2025. But hopefully he comes back soon enough and he remains healthy and he helps you win some games. But again, I think that's still yet to be determined. But right now, when you're going in to your 3rd season now, and you're still hurt, you're probably not going to earn yourself a contract unless it's a cheap one. You then go to Junior Fehoko, the defensive tackle out of San Jose State. He not good. He was mainly a backup, but not a good backup. He's primarily been injured, and then he was waived in 2024. So that's not good. And that's a 4th-round pick for you, by the way. And then you have Eric Scott Jr., the cornerback out of Southern Miss. Again, similar to Junior Fehoko, not good. Even as a backup, not good. And then he was waived in 2024 because of other moves you made to acquire cornerbacks into the room. So really, you only have two guys that are still on the team, and they aren't making impacts for you. One of them's just not good. The other is hurt. So you really missed bad on this 2023 draft class. And then we moved to 2024, and of course, there's still a lot to be determined here. Of course, you have Marshawn Kneeland, the defensive end out of Western Michigan, Maris Leofau, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, Kalen Carson, the cornerback out of Wake Forest, and then Justin Rogers, the defensive tackle out of Auburn. He's not on the team anymore. However, when you really look at it, there's still a yet to be determined type of thing with some of these guys, especially Marshawn Kneeland and Maris Leofau. With Kalen Carson, he's been hurt, so I can't really determine what we see in him. But if I'm just going off of what I'm seeing and what I've been watching on film, Marshawn Kneeland's been meh. Maris Leofau, he's meh, but there's signs of him being good and other signs of him being terrible. And then finally, Kalen Carson, he's just been hurt, and you really don't have a lot to go off of. So looking at the totality of draft picks that the Cowboys made, when we look at every single draft pick that they made on the defensive side of the ball, 2023 and 2021 were instances of how they very much so impacted the 2025 defense we're seeing today. The amount of misses that you had in 2021, the misses you had in 2023, granted, one of them's hurt, but the fact is that when you whiff on those types of picks, especially a team that prides itself on drafting and developing talent and paying the talent that you acquired through the draft, if you miss, oh boy, does this thing look terrible. And so through the Mike McCarthy era, you have the notable players of Trevon Diggs, Micah Parsons, Osa Odigizua, Deron Bland. Those are the notable names that as we kind of go back and I look at the list, those are the guys where it's like, awesome, you made hits on those. And again, you're not going to hit on every single draft pick. So I want to make it clear that while I understand that, the fact is that you need your other draft picks to be depth pieces for you. And if they're not even on the team after 2 seasons, and we're talking about guys that were drafted in the 4th and even the 5th round, that's a problem. Like if we're talking about 6th and 7th, understandably, those are guys that you're taking chances on. Like a guy like Anthony Brown, for example, was a 6th round draft pick. To get a solid starting corner out of him for that particular draft capital is very good. I'm not looking to be like, okay, I'm expecting that. And I think that's where the Cowboys have done a terrible job of really marketing how they construct their team and how fans perceive what we need to see. The main thing I'm trying to at least tell you guys is that the Cowboys have a massive ego problem. Rather than trying to just immediately correct the actions of them failing to hit, whether it be on a draft pick or maybe they made a trade and they failed to hit on that, all they're doing is basically just hoping to God things work out. Rather than just accelerate the process of rebuilding a particular part of the team, they just let it stick and just go from there. Right? You have a pass rush that just isn't optimal. And so rather than going and acquiring another pass rusher, you're just like, okay, we're just going to sit there. Or with how much issues you have in the safety room, okay, we're fine. We'll just hope that things work out. And I hope the Cowboys don't make a panic trade because this is exactly what happens when you have deficiencies on certain parts of your team and the season just looks like the way it is. If the Cowboys continue to win games, I think that they won't make a panic trade, but last year they made the panic trade for Jonathan Mingo. I understand on the offensive side of the ball, and I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but at the end of the day, the Dallas Cowboys have to recognize where they're at, and you can't fully rely on your draft picks to give you the depth and starters that you think you're going to get. Because now these fans that you have an improper expectation as to what to expect from these players, as to what we need to see from them. It's not fair to these players. If they're a sixth-round draft pick and they end up being better than we thought, that's great, but we shouldn't expect these guys to be all pros. That's not what's going to happen. It's not even guaranteed for first-rounders. I understand that, but the fact is that if you're expecting a sixth-round draft pick to come in and save your defense, I think you're in a bad position. But with that being said, guys, this looks like where we're seeing those issues. It's stemming from the misses that we've had on the defensive side of the ball in the draft under Mike McCarthy. And I want to hear what you guys have to say. What do you have to say about the guys that are on this list? Did I judge them too harshly? Am I not being harsh enough? Tell me what you guys thought about these draft classes down in the comment section below. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.